You were muted on the board for some reason. That's because you were probably muted. Okay, let's start. Let's take our time with the jam at the beginning.
There we go. Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Good.
Shabbat Shalom.
Welcome to all those who are here and all those who are joining us via live stream. We're so happy to be with you on this evening. We're going to begin our service on page 10 in your prayer books or on the screens behind me. The prayers are on the walls, so please join us in whichever way is most comfortable for you with the words of Hine Ma Tov, how good and how sweet it is for us to be together on this evening. Page 10. Hine ma tov u'ma na'im, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov u'ma na'im, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov u'ma na'im, shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov u'ma na'im, shevet achim gam yachad.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We extend to all of you and I'll emphasize the word warm welcome. And those of you who are online, I know often feel a little bit of FOMO, that's right, fear of missing out. But tonight, we are in the middle of finally replacing 60-year boilers here at TBJ. And we thought April would be the perfect month. After all, it's sort of in between. Little did we know that we get 90-degree weather. So a little bit warmer here tonight, but I promise you, you're going to have nice chilly air as the AC is fixed. And
it's for a good cause.
All for sacred causes. So,
yes.
So happy to have all of you here this evening. This is one of those odd evenings during the year that we do not have a bar bat mitzvah tomorrow. So you're all coming of age with us this evening. And in that vein, we want to call on the Rauschbergs, all four of them, to come up and kindle the Sabbath lights.
First is right here.
As these Shabbat candles give light to all who behold them, so may we, by our lives, give light to all who behold us. As their brightness reminds us of the generations of Israel who have kindled light, so may we, in our own day, be among those who kindle light.
Start right here.
O source of light and truth, creator of the eternal law of goodness, help us to find knowledge by which to live. Lead us to take the words we shall speak unto our hearts and our lives. Bless all who enter the sanctuary in need, all who bring the offerings of their heart. May our worship lead us to acts of kindness, peace, and love.
Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat. Amen. On the topic of light, when you came in, or perhaps earlier today you received an email in which we unveiled to you our new logo, which is on the screen behind me. This logo is based on the Ner Tamid in our sanctuary. So next time you are in the sanctuary, you should take an up-close look. And it has all these beautiful, intricate designs. The Ner Tamid is a symbol in our tradition that comes right from the part of the Torah that we are reading. I think we got our first mention of it just about a week ago or 2 weeks ago, when we're taught that on the altar, that the priests of old had to kindle a light that would never go out. And we take that tradition, and in our houses of worship, we have lights that are perpetually lit, that are a representation of the light of our tradition, the light of our communities, and the ways in which we continue to kindle those aspects of who we are through generations and over many centuries and years. When I think about this place and the storied legacy of the 175 years of Jeshurun, which I've only had the privilege of being here for a few of those years, and I think about the thing that keeps the light kindled, it's all of you. It's all of us together, coming together on a Friday night, welcoming in Shabbat, lifting our voices, thinking about what it means to sit side by side, arm to arm with either someone that we know and love or someone that we are just meeting for the first time. And so as we welcome in Shabbat with Lecha Dodi, welcoming the Sabbath bride, I want to just honor that light, the light that exists in this community, that exists in this chapel this evening, and that spans, many different townships and locations, and how TBJ really is, I like to say all roads lead back to TBJ, because somehow, everywhere you go, you'll meet someone who is somehow connected to the beautiful community that we have here. And so as we sing together, Lecha Dodi, I want to honor that light, the light that you kindle each week in me and that we kindle each week in each other. Lecha Dodi, page 20 in our prayer books. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la la la, ya la 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 la, ya la la la, ya la 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 la, ya la la la, ya la 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 la, Lecha Dodi, likrat kala. Shabbat nekabela, shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad hishmianu el hamiuchad Adonai echad u'shemo echad l'shemu tiferet ve'litila lecha dodi. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'necha ki hi mekor haberacha berosh mikedem nesucha sof ma'aseh b'machshava techila lecha dodi likrat kala. Daberi kvod Adonai alayich tigla lecha dodi likrat kala penei Shabbat nekabela boi v'shalom ateret gam besimcha uv'tzola toch emune am segula boi chala, boi chala. Lecha dodi likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekabela.
Turning ahead in our prayer books to page 146, we invite you to please rise for the Baruch Hu. Please join me in the Hebrew. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bidvaro ma'ariv aravim, b'chokhmah potech she'arim, uvitvuna mishane itim, umachalif et hazmanim, umisader et hakochavim, b'mishmerotehem barakia kirtzono. Borei yom v'layla, golel or mipnei choshech, v'choshech mipnei or.
ומעביר יום ומביא לילה, ומבדיל בין יום ובין לילה, אדוני צבאות שמו. אל חי וקיים, תמיד ימלוך עלינו לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני, המעריב ערבי.
Responsively, in each age we receive and transmit Torah. At each moment we are addressed by the world together.
In each age we are challenged by our ancient teaching. At each moment we stand face to face with truth.
In each age we add our wisdom to that which has gone before. At each moment the knowing heart is filled with wonder.
In each age the children of Torah become its builders and seek to set the world firm on a foundation of truth. Baruch atah Adonai, ohev amo Yisrael. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol meodecha ve'hayu hadvarim ha'ele Asher Anochi Mitzavecha Hayom Al Levavecha Veshinantam Levanecha V'dibarta bam B'shivtecha B'beitecha U'lechtecha V'aderech U'v'shochbecha U'v'kumecha U'kshartam le'ot Al yadecha V'hayu letotafot Beinenecha Uchtavtam Al mezuzot beitecha U'visharecha Leman tizkeru Va'asitem et kol. We grant everyone what we claim for ourselves.
Long ago we escaped the tyranny of Egypt. Our people saw the power of the Most High.
We learned God's presence redeems time and event, so we celebrate this power that makes for freedom. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh norah tehilot oseh. ראו בניך בוקי הים לפני משה ומרים זה אלי ענו ואמרו זה אלי ענו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד אדוני ונאמר כי פדה אדוני את יעקב וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל amen. Give us a place to rest, O God. Bring us shelter in the long, soft evening shadows of your truth. You are true protection and safety. In your presence we find love and acceptance. Watch over us as we go forth. Prepare for us as we return. Spread over us your shelter of peace, over all we love, over our Jerusalem and yours. Baruch atah Adonai, haporei sukat shalom, aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael, ve'al Yerushalayim.
On page 155, we rise for the blessings of the Amidah.
Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel Velohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor V'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, Vekonei Hakol, V'zocher Chastei Avot V'imachot, Umevi Geula Livnei B'neihem, Lema'an Shemo Be'ahava, Melech Ozer U'Moshia U'Magen, Baruch Atah Adonai, Magen Avraham Vezrat Sarah, Atah Gibor Leolam Adonai, Mechayei Hakol, Atah Rav Lehoshia, Mechalkel Chaim Bechesed, Mechayei Hakol Berachamim Rabim, Somech Noflim Verofei Cholim, Umatir Asurim, Umekayem Emunato Lishenei Afar, Michamocha Ba'al Gevurot, Umidom Melach, Melech Memit, Umechaye, Umatmiach Yeshua, V'ne'eman atah lehachayot hakol, Baruch atah Adonai, Mechayei hakol. Atah kadosh v'shimcha kadosh, U'kadoshim b'chol yom yahalelucha selah, Baruch atah Adonai, Ha'el hakadosh.
Please be seated. At this point in our service, we turn our thoughts and we turn our prayers to those in our community who are in need of a prayer of healing. On this Shabbat, we send our prayers to Cindy Baker, Emil Batat, Ada Barbara Coravelli, Janice Cummins, Helene Dreskin, Susie Fisher, Alfred Marcus, Melissa Miller, Wayne Polame, and Gerard Roos. If there are others in our community for whom you'd like us to say a public mishaberach, a public prayer of healing, as I come around the room, raise your hands. I'll ask you to say their name out loud, and if you feel so inclined, to acknowledge your relationship to them. Prayers of healing. Please. Thank you. Yeah, please. Thank you. Yeah, Carol. Patty. Bill. Thank you. Yeah, Barbara. Thank you. Yeah, Fred. Thank you. Yeah, Bobby. Yeah, please, Sharon. We take them all into our hearts with our own, and also acknowledge those people who have no one to say a mishaberach for them. And with all of them, we say, Baruch atah Adonai, Rofei Cholim. We praise you, Adonai, our God, you who we call healer of the sick.
Mishaberach Avotenu Mekor HaBracha Leimotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mishaberach Imotenu Mekor HaBracha Lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing, Spirit, and let us say, Amen.
From the healing of the individual to the healing of the collective, praying for the most elusive, but of course the most precious gift of all, the gift of shalom, of wholeness, of balance, dear God of peace. Page 164, Shalom Rav.
Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Le'olam Ki Ata Umelech Adon Lechol HaShalom Baruch atah Adonai hamevarech et amo Yisrael v'shalom. Amen.
In our line of work, we have to be as careful as other professionals do in using jargon or symbols that might make sense to us but don't necessarily make sense to everyone else. I realized during Lecha Dodi tonight that there is something that I probably have been doing for 30 years, which is the last verse when you say Boi Chala, you are welcoming in the Sabbath bride. And I always pull it close into my heart, for me symbolizing my spirit, because we're told on Shabbat that during that moment, God breathes in an extra soul to us, that we have an extra soul for 24 hours. Of course, one of my professors, one of the great mystical writers, Arthur Green, said, "My Kinderlach, my children, before you think about the second soul, do you know where the first one is?" That was a good point. And his goes on to explain in one of his writings that what an extra soul means to him is that we somehow deepen ourselves, that we become hyper-aware, or as people like to say, super-aware today, of the things that are around us, the things that we sort of so easily pass by because we are generally looking down at the ground, if not the ground, into our devices, and we're missing the world happening right around us. After all, the heat feels like summer, but the leaves have not yet completely adorned our trees. So it's worthwhile looking, because each of these springs is another cycle around the world, and we only get a certain amount of those cycles. So running around today the way that we often do on Fridays, and of course knowing that Shabbat is coming, my last two meetings that I had to shoehorn in, but when it comes to kids, I will always make the time. At 4 o'clock, I had a 16-year-old, and at 4:30, I had a 14-year-old. The 16-year-old is leaving to Israel on Wednesday for a quarter. He's doing a quarter of a semester. Now, the Milburn Public Schools think that that is blasphemy. You're never supposed to leave the public school system because no one knows how to teach as well as they do in Milburn, right? Well, this young man is going off, and I said to him, besides sort of talking through what he was nervous about and excited, I said, "Did you have any questions?" And he said, "Yeah, the reason I came to you is I really want to understand this judicial mess before I get there." 16 years old. I said, okay. So in about 15 minutes, I tried to explain to him the best I could. I didn't have the ambassador here yet to help explicate the matter. And before he left, I said, Reed, why are you going to Israel? Not many kids leave that way. He said, oh, because your wife told me to. And sure enough, we were at some event with his family, and he was talking to my wife. She said, you should go to Israel. And the kid actually listened. Now, if our kids only listened to her the way that other kids do, we'd be in good shape. The second one came in because his 18-year-old dog died this week, 18. And he wanted to talk about life and death. And he wanted to talk about his parents' reaction and his reaction and what it is that happens to us or all beings after. So that was in a half hour also. So I told him that he'd be cheated just a little bit because after all, these are things that we talk a lifetime about. But before he left, I said, without using his name, I said, young man, which I didn't say, I will tell you that I think our bodies grow tall and sometimes wide, but our souls are the things that deepen. And there's a difference between growing tall and wide and deepening. And what you're doing by way of your process is you're deepening as a human being by virtue of all these events in your life. This is an ongoing talk. It started off with God, and then this happened. And what I'm trying to say all in all is as I brought the soul into me tonight that God is granting me, I am hyper aware of these two incredibly mature spiritually and intellectually young men. And I'd like to also ask you, as we take a few moments to pray in silence, what it is that you want to be hyper aware of this week. What actually happened in your interactions that may change your trajectory as you enter Shabbat? What are the things that you're trying to reconcile this week, the things that went really well, and the things that didn't go as well? We mix it around this pot of soup that we call Shabbat. And when it comes out on the other side and the extra soul flows back to God until it comes to us next week, we get to somehow do an accounting of the soul, what we call Yom Kippur Katan. That's what Shabbat is called, the Yom Kippur Katan, a small Yom Kippur, that moment for awareness, that moment for clarity, and maybe even that moment for deepening. We pray in silence.
Od yavo shalom aleinu. Od yavo shalom aleinu. Od yavo shalom aleinu. Ve'al kulam. Od yavo shalom aleinu. Od yavo shalom aleinu. Od yavo shalom aleinu ve'al kulam. Salam aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam. Salam shalom. Join us. Od yavo shalom aleinu. Od yavo shalom aleinu. Od yavo shalom aleinu ve'al kulam. Od yavo shalom aleinu. Od yavo shalom aleinu. Od yavo shalom aleinu. Ve'al kulam salam aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam. Salam shalom. Salam aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam. Salam shalom. Od yavo shalom aleinu. Od yavo shalom aleinu. Od yavo shalom aleinu. Ve'al kulam.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. This Shabbat marks the fourth of four series of a series of four of authors that we brought to B'nai Jeshurun this year. And quite honestly, this is the one I've been most excited for, and that is including the fact that I was one of the authors of the four. So that says a lot about my sense of what this evening is going to bring. Martin Indyk is Distinguished Fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations in New York. He served twice as U.S. Ambassador to Israel, as well as President Clinton's Middle East Advisor on the National Security Council. In President Clinton's second term, he served as Assistant Secretary of State for Near East Affairs. Prior to serving the Clinton administration, he was the founding executive director of the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. After leaving government in 2000, he joined the Brookings Institution, where he established its Center of Middle East Policy. He was appointed by President Obama as a special envoy in 2013 for Israeli-Palestinian negotiations. Mr. Ambassador, you obviously enjoy pain. In 2021, he wrote and published Master of the Game, Henry Kissinger and the Art of Middle East Diplomacy, a perceptive and provocative history of Henry Kissinger's diplomatic negotiations in the Middle East that illuminates the unique challenges and barriers Kissinger and his successors have faced in their attempts to broker peace between Israel and its Arab neighbors. Master of the Game is both that of a historian poring over the records of these events, as well as an inside player seeking to glean lessons from Middle East peacemaking. He makes clear that understanding Kissinger's design for Middle East peacemaking is key to comprehending how to and how not to make peace. A couple of things. First of all, by way of process, the ambassador is going to speak for a little bit. We'll open up for a couple, 3 questions, and then we'll be here to greet us after by a table of his books where you'll be able to buy them and also get them signed this evening. I'm embarrassed to admit that when my wife and I met in the year 2000, we were pretty nerdy and enjoyed and loved watching Martin Indyk on television, and actually gave us the thought and the hope that we actually were going to reach Middle East peace in the late 90s and early 2000s. So here we are still struggling for the same. So you could see why it is that we're excited. We're so privileged to have you here, Mr. Ambassador, Mr. Secretary, and we offer you a very warm welcome from Congregation B'nai Jeshurun. Please join us.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
I have to say that I've never been to Short Hills, New Jersey before. And when I have been traveling around the country talking about my book to Jewish communities, I always am unsure of what I'm going to encounter. It can be anything from 5 people to 150 people. But I did not expect to have the opportunity to participate in such a beautiful Shabbat evening with Rabbi Gewurz and Cantor Fishbein and this great little orchestra. So it's been a real bonus for me, and I'm grateful to you for that. Israel is in trouble. And its troubles come in a variety of forms that all seem to be coming together in a kind of horrendous perfect storm. The one that is most on our minds at the moment is the internal division in Israel, brought on by a far-right religious government's determination to curb the independence of the judiciary. We have a pause in that confrontation, but the confrontation was very deep and very profound. I had the opportunity to be there and to talk to both sides and to participate in the demonstrations and to see that this is not just about Israel's democracy, although it's very much about that, but it's also about the tribes of Israel coming into a confrontation in a way that, in a sense, we who follow Israel closely have always been aware of the challenge and the difficulties of this number of disparate tribes. But now we have a situation in which a government that has been legitimately elected, has a majority, but is pursuing in the minds of the secular tribe of Israel illegitimate objectives that challenge Israel's democracy and could profoundly change it. And so we have a real clash between the secular Israel that is rising up, hundreds of thousands in demonstrations week after week across the country, 14 weeks now. And on the other side, religious and right-wing parties, far right-wing parties, representing the settlers who feel that it's their turn to promote a more Jewish rather than democratic kind of Israel. It's a real clash of beliefs and in many ways for both sides it's existential, but it's causing great division within the country. At the same time, as Israel faces real challenges externally with the Palestinians in the West Bank who are living with a crumbling Palestinian Authority that no longer controls cities outside of Ramallah, with young Palestinian militants who don't remember the last Intifada and aren't deterred by it for their terrorist attacks on Israeli civilians. 560,000 Israeli settlers now in the West Bank, providing them with a target-rich environment and easy access to weapons. And so we have this steady drumbeat of terrorism, Israeli army responding, going into the cities that the Palestinian Authority no longer controls, and that increases the friction and the death toll on the Palestinian side, which just ramps up the tensions and the violence. And of course, Iran is advancing to the nuclear threshold with no negotiations and no prospect, it seems, for stopping them at a very time when Israel has to hope to deter Iran from crossing the nuclear threshold. The very pilots responsible for any kind of military action against Iran are the ones who are standing up and saying, we will not respond to the call to duty if this effort to undermine Israel's democracy goes ahead. And so the combination of external threats and internal division combined to produce what I refer to as this perfect storm that places Israel in a very fragile condition. What does this have to do with my book, you might ask? But my book starts with a time 50 years ago, which many of you, I think, will recall, when Israel was also in trouble. Yom Kippur of 1973, when the armies of Egypt and Syria launched a surprise attacks on Israel, and Israel was caught unprepared. And in the war that ensued, Israel was able to turn the tide of battle and prevent what for a moment there in the early days looked like its destruction. The man who was responsible for ensuring that Israel had the means to launch its counteroffensives against Egypt and Syria, and then the man who negotiated the ceasefire was Henry Kissinger, the subject of my book. Of course, he worked for President Nixon, and President Nixon at the time ordered the massive resupply of arms to Israel. But it was Kissinger that used that pressure that was generated by America's arms supplies and the counteroffensives launched by Israel to broker a ceasefire and then begin a peace process. And it's that story of how Kissinger negotiated ceasefire and then the series of agreements, two between Israel and Egypt, one between Israel and Syria, which laid the foundations for the American-led peace process in the Middle East. It took those negotiations and the agreements with Egypt, essentially took Egypt out of the conflict with Israel and made the idea of Israeli-Arab war between Israel and the Arab states no longer feasible, laying the foundations for a peace treaty that was negotiated by Jimmy Carter 2 years after Kissinger left office. The Israel-Syria agreement that he negotiated, the disengagement on the Golan Heights, has kept the peace more or less completely quiet border up there for most of the last 50 years, despite the fact that Syria has descended into civil war and Iran is promoting its proxies there to push towards the Golan Heights. Nevertheless, the government of Syria, such as it is, still maintains that agreement with Israel. And so, as a result, the foundations for the peace that Israel now enjoys between Israel and Egypt, calm between Israel and Syria, the peace between Israel and Jordan, that President Clinton, and I was a member of his peace team, we helped to negotiate back in 1994. The Abraham Accords came in the Trump administration. That whole long process of peacemaking that has helped to end Israel's isolation and strengthen it with the support of the United States to the point where it enjoys peace with almost all of its Arab neighbors, but not yet with the Palestinians. The origins of that are in Henry Kissinger's diplomacy. As the Rabbi mentioned, I was President Obama's Middle East envoy for Israeli-Palestinian negotiations. Those were the last negotiations that took place in 2013, 2014. Like negotiations before them since 2000 and negotiations after them, they have all failed to resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So it was that I decided, trying to understand what has gone wrong, that I would go back to where an earlier age where an American diplomat succeeded in brokering peace agreements between Israel and its Arab neighbors. So that's essentially what the book is about. I don't have time to go into all of the lessons, but I want to just stress one. which is that Kissinger had a deeply skeptical view of peacemaking. He thought, actually, and he's written about this, that the pursuit of peace with too much passion and commitment had the great danger of achieving the opposite, of achieving war instead. He called it the paradox of peace. He, of course, was informed by his own experience as a young Jew fleeing from Nazi Germany, with 13 of his immediate family were murdered by the Nazis, and saw what appeasement led to in the Second World War, or what the Peace Treaty of Versailles, the peace to end all peace at the end of the First World War, ended up producing the conditions for the Second World War. And so Kissinger's view on peacemaking was that order was more important than peace, that order, as he defined it, as a balance of power in the favour of those who were supporting stability as opposed to launching wars, that order could produce an amelioration of conflict, and that amelioration of conflict could eventually lead to peace when both sides were ready for it. And so as a result, his peacemaking was very conservative. It was incremental. He called it step-by-step diplomacy. And his focus was on just trying to move things forward in the direction of peace. Today, people scoff at the peace process and say, treat it like it's a dirty word, it's a joke. But Kissinger's process was very important because it got both sides used to the idea of living together, used to the idea that they would have to compromise. And in that way, he was far more successful than we who came after him, who, just as it says in the Bible, the Pharaohs knew not Jacob. We just read about that in the Haggadah. We knew not Kissinger, in the sense that we did not understand the reason for his caution and the reason for his conservative, incremental approach to peacemaking. And we, and when I say we, I'm talking about all the presidents and secretaries of state who came after him. Jimmy Carter was successful because of the ripeness of Egypt and Israel to making peace, but all the rest of presidents and secretaries of states tried for the breakthroughs to peace agreements and failed for the most part, one exception being between Israel and Jordan. And that failure was particularly acute when it came to the effort to resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And there, again, Oslo has become a dirty word, but Oslo was a step-by-step incremental process introduced by Yitzhak Rabin, who had learnt it from Kissinger when he was Prime Minister the first time and dealt with Kissinger back in the 1970s. And the Oslo process was designed not to resolve the conflict. It has nothing in Oslo about Palestinian state, Jerusalem, refugees, final borders. It's all about a step-by-step process of withdrawal by the Israeli army from parts of the West Bank and Gaza over a period of time in which eventually, the theory was, they would, both sides would come to terms with each other and recognise the need for compromise and reconciliation, and at that point would be ready to make peace. Well, we broke that process by trying too eagerly and with too much passion to resolve the conflict, whether it was at Camp David, II, with Clinton and Barack and Arafat, or whether it was Donald Trump and Jared Kushner with the deal of the century and all the presidents in between. And because of that effort to try to jump towards the resolution of the conflict, we're now in a situation where it is so broken, there is so little trust between the two sides, and so much enmity between them that you can't get there from here. And so the lesson is that we need a Kissingerian step-by-step process to be reintroduced now, to rebuild the trust and to try to find a way to eventually achieve a reconciliation between Israelis and Palestinians. I do not believe that this is going to come in my lifetime. I do not believe that we're going to be able to avoid a bloody confrontation that is already underway between Israelis and Palestinians again. But after that, just as after the war between Israel and Egypt and Syria, will come a time again when leaders will emerge and hopefully peace brokers that will know Kissinger, and we will embark again on the effort for Israel to achieve peace. Thank you.
So folks, I have like 10 questions, but I'm going to defer to you, and obviously a wonderful book to read. So we have time for about 2. So questions. Okay, Jean?
I never had thought before about Kissinger's work on the Congress of Vienna, but certainly that was a basis for his work, right?
Yes. Kissinger's model for his peacemaking in the Middle East was indeed the order that was created in the wake of the Napoleonic Wars in early 19th century Europe. And the Congress of Vienna ushered in a period of almost 100 years of order and more or less peace between the great powers in Europe. And Kissinger wrote his first book about that. It's called A World Restored. Castlereagh, Metternich, and the Problems of Peace. So even back then, it was his doctoral dissertation, he saw peace as problematic. And it may seem strange, certainly to Middle East experts, it seems strange that you could take a European model of maintaining order and peacemaking and just apply it to the Middle East, and it would work. But it did. It's a testament to his skills. But there's no doubt that when he came around to peacemaking, he sought to establish the kind of order that was established in 19th century Europe. And it worked between Israel and Syria, between Israel and Egypt, and essentially between Israel and the Arab states. The Abraham Accords were the outgrowth of that Kissingerian process. It took 40 years. That's exactly the timetable that Kissinger had in mind. So, yeah, it was his knowledge of history, European history, that was the key to his success at peacemaking in the Middle East.
With your knowledge, and what, as you just said, the old adage is, if we don't learn from history, we're bound to repeat it. With your approach, with your knowledge, with your understanding of Mr. Kissinger, would you be able to give a good insight now, if I were the president, or you were counsel to the president, of what is going on in the Middle East right now, where you have the Saudis and the Syrians meeting again? There is a rapprochement between the Saudis and the Iranians. China has now entered the picture and bringing peace, supposedly. And you have a dissolution of order, your term, in Israel between the right and the left. What would you counsel?
What would Kissinger counsel?
Good. What would Kissinger counsel?
No, what would you counsel?
What would I counsel? Well, the tumult that you referred to, and there are other dimensions of it that I also mentioned, in particular the Iranian effort to acquire a threshold capability threshold nuclear capability. These are all, in part, a consequence of the decline of America's dominance in the region. And it's not that it was so peaceful during our time of dominance, but now that we have priorities elsewhere, and successive presidents, whether it's Obama or Trump or Biden, have redefined our interests in the region, in particular because we're now the largest oil producer in the world, and we no longer depend on Middle Eastern oil in the way that we used to. We don't have the same vital interest. Yes, we have a real interest in Israel's survival and well-being, and the well-being of our Arab partners and allies there. But it's highly unlikely that an American president will go back to war in the Middle East again, especially when the priorities are elsewhere, dealing with an aggressive Russia or an assertive China in Europe and in Asia. So we have to start by recognizing that our stake in the order in the region is less than it used to be. And our ability to maintain order is less than it used to be because of these other more pressing priorities. And so therefore we have to find a way to do more with less. And in order to do more with less, we need our allies in the region to step up and take responsibility for maintaining order and stability. And we need to be able to step back and simply support them rather than do it for them. Israel becomes essential in that process because it is the strongest military power in the region, strong because of its own capabilities, strong because of the American support that it has received over such a long period of time. And so Israel is critically important in that structure of maintaining order, as it was even back in Kissinger's day, but it's even more so today. So we cannot afford for Israel to be divided. It affects America's national interests, not just the common values that underpin the US-Israel relationship, but also our interests in the region. If Israel is divided, its ability to deter our enemies, Israel's enemies, the Arabs' enemies, particularly Iran and its proxies, is going to be reduced. And it's no coincidence that suddenly we got rockets coming in from Lebanon into Israel, which we haven't seen, I don't know, since 2006. Yeah. Because they sense there's a weakness there and they're going to try to probe it, they being the Iranians and their proxies. So that's why President Biden spoke out and told Netanyahu in very clear terms, you need to fix this. You need to back away because we can't afford to have Israel divided in this way. So that's one critical thing. Second thing is we needed our Arab partners and allies to step up. And unfortunately, the Saudis, who have an important role to play as the strongest economic power in the region, are instead, getting into bed with China and Iran. And that is also a problem that we need to try to fix and get the Saudis to come back into a more productive and constructive role, both in terms of their oil production and maintenance of reasonable oil prices, and in terms of their leadership in the Gulf Arabs. So, I mean, I could go on for a while, but that's the essential thing that needs to be done now, is that the United States needs to find a way to do more with less. And in order to do that, we need our allies in the region to step up, and that is especially the case for our ally Israel.
There's not a more compelling case to buy the ambassador's book. I'm looking forward to reading it myself. So again, right outside these walls, there'll be something to eat and also an opportunity to meet the ambassador, to buy a book, and to have it signed. But meanwhile, a real sense of gratitude to Ambassador Martin and Dick. Thank you. Turning back to the concluding part of our service, the prayer that really makes us hope and wonder and look towards a sense of redemption, we ask you to please rise for Aleinu.
Aleinu לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו
And now at this point in our service, we turn our thoughts to those who have departed this earth, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people and those of every race and every nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them on the Shabbat, let us meditate on the meaning of love and of loss, of life and of death. As is our tradition here, if you hear the name of one that you may have lost, please feel free to stand to honor their memories. We're saddened to announce the passing of Beverly Claire Schwartz, sister of Alan and Phyllis Mainkoff. A private funeral will be held on the 19th. In the period of Shiva, we remember Leonard Garner, son of David. And during this period of Shloshim, the traditional 30-day period of mourning, we remember James Tophius, Gloria Fleischner, Marcy Goldsmith and Geraldine Silverman, Mark Soloff, Rose Vinokur, Paul Barton Bochnek, and Melvin Shapiro. And on this, their Yortzeit, their yearly anniversary of death, we remember Isadore Altman, Jerome A. Ames, Joseph Bartner, Seymour Berkowitz, Maurice Bick, Monroe Bierman, Emily Altman Block, Jerome J. Blumberg, Beth Brief, Jean Berger, Bessie Engel, Gladys Fuhrer, Amy Ellen Friedman, Daniel Allen Friedman, Muriel Weinberg Gilbert, Helen E. Gilbert, Pauline Glaubiger, Howard W. Golden, Henrietta L. Greenbaum, Joseph Halpern, Hannah L. Harris, Charles Lewis Holder, Louis Horowitz, Judith Liebman Hyman, Myron Eisler, Heyman Jadel, Blanche E. Kaplan, Mildred Cohen Kaufman, Else Kiefer, Goldie Lasky, Walter Lehman, Carl P. Lindemann, Elise Lipsy, Leo Lowenstein, Benjamin Markowitz, Dr. Emil Mautner, Judge Max Meller, Suzanne Gupp-Mullman, Dora Poteski, Morris Rockland, Etta Rose Reinhold, Tilly Lewis Rich, Richard Rovid, Barbara Rovid, Cynthia Gail Rutkin, Minnie Lyon Schenken, Robert M. Schenkel, George G. Schindel, Shirley Ruth Sherman, Ruth R. Gould Schinberg, Beatrice B. Siegel, Carrie Bamberger Silp, Milton Simon, Irving J. Treen, Shirley Weiner, and Ida B. Zieler. And we add to those who have been lost those who once again were taken in a mass shooting this week in our country. Terrell Cohill, Thomas Elliott, Tristan Morgan, Joanna Purcell. Our hearts are, of course, with their families as well, as their families and lives have been ripped apart. Zecher Tzadik Livracha. May the memory of the righteous be a blessing to each and every one of us praying here in the Shabbat Eve. And let's honor their memories by inviting their souls in to dwell among us as we rise as one community to say the words of Kaddish. They're found on page 294. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, bi'olma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon v'yomechon, uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agalau v'zman kari v'yemru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam ulolmei al maya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudesha barichu, la'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, da'amiran v'yolma v'yemru amen. Yehei shlama Rabbah min shemaya v'chayim, Aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'yemru amen. Osei shalom b'mromav, hu yaseh shalom. Aleinu v'yal kol v'yemru amen. May the source of peace send peace to all who mourn here and comfort to those who are bereaved everywhere. As together as one community we say, amen. Please be seated. Friends, as the cantor introduced in the beginning of the service, it sounds like some kind of marketing pitch, but it's just that, yes, we have rebranded. Synagogues do it also. You can see the new logo on your Shabbat Shalom, on your order of worship, and also, of course, videos and all kinds of things that have come out this day. And you can comment after Shabbat in any way that you want to. I was just with someone in our congregation who was at a law firm, and they said, 100 years of our logo, and what a disgusting logo. So we did not. This is not us. Talking about the law firm, Amy, yes, so it's okay. Anyway, we'd rather hear that after Shabbat if you feel that way. Yeah. But Cantor Fishbein, I'll just tell you, was largely responsible.
It's true.
She came from a marketing background, so thank you, Cantor Fishbein, for all the incredible work. Take your orders of worship with you this evening because there's a lot coming up. It's a very busy spring here. The only thing I do want to point out is that our sofer, our scribe, who has been writing our Torah, really once in a generation kind of thing to happen for a congregation, is coming back one last time Sunday for all of you, Monday for all of our children, or there'll be children here on Sunday. There are still spots open, but by the time we finish this, we figured out there'll be 400 or 500 members of the congregation who have somehow scribed their own letter into the Torah, which is just an extraordinary and moving thing, at least for me personally. So I have not, I met the sofer in Israel, as you saw from the video, but not here at TBJ. He's going to then be sewing the Torah together on Monday, because this is it, where he's going to be finished, and then it's going to be sort of put on ice, shall we say, until, of course, we're not going to use it until we dedicate it in the fall, and then we'll use it for Simchat Torah. So really exciting things. Again, lots coming up. I guess the other thing I will point out, because it's getting close, is that our own cantor, as you know, has become our senior cantor. You could tell by the age, right? And so we are officially installing her on May the 12th. And as should come along with it, it's not just going to be a service, which will not be long, because after that there's going to be an extraordinary concert that Lucy is putting together with some of her colleagues. Of course, our cantor emeritus, Howard Stahl, will be here. So come celebrate our cantor, our 175th year, and I'll be saying this a lot. It's a milestone moment because this is the first female cantor, actually senior cantor, this congregation has ever hired. And I hate to say it, there's probably only 5 or 6 others in the country, which is sad in this day and age, but Cantor Fishbein is helping to break that glass ceiling, which is important on so many fronts. So come celebrate with her and her family that evening. Now, we always say that bar bat mitzvah, we use one of those cliches, is not just a end, but it's a middle and a gate to the next step. Well, Hannah Zox really symbolizes that in every way, because Hannah's bat mitzvah now, Hannah was 3 weeks ago, I think, and she comes to services every week, and I asked her if she'd come and share her voice again, so she's going to lead us in Kiddush and Motzi. She didn't know this was coming, so be really loving of her, and we ask you to please rise for Kiddush.
Okay, my love.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kedishanu b'mitzvotav, v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kodsho, be'ahava uvratzon, hinhi lanu, zikaron l'maaseh v'reishit, ki hu yom tehila lemikra'e kodesh, zeher litziat mitzrayim, kivanu v'hartav, ve'otanu kidashtav, mikol ha'amim, v'shabbat kodshecha, be'ahava uvratzon, hinhatanu. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh haShabbat.
Amen. Why don't you take a sip of the juice? You have to do that again also? Since we have you up here, how about we negotiate motzi also?
Yeah.
All right.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lehem haaretz.
Amen. You see, Hannah, the Hebrew still works. Beautiful job.
We're going to bring our service to a close with the words that we sang, that prayer for peace. It can be challenging to pray for peace if we don't believe that it will come, and so we have to believe. So we do, and we say peace will be upon us soon, and God willing, upon everyone on this earth. Please sing with us. Od yavo shalom aleinu, od yavo shalom aleinu, od yavo shalom aleinu, ve'al kulam, od yavo shalom aleinu, od yavo shalom aleinu, od yavo shalom aleinu, ve'al kulam, salam aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam, salam shalom, salam aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam, salam shalom. Od yavo shalom aleinu, od yavo shalom aleinu, od yavo shalom aleinu, ve'al kulam. One more time. Od yavo shalom aleinu, od yavo shalom aleinu, od yavo shalom aleinu, ve'al kulam.
Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Shabbat shalom.